That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat up beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. For when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some many, 30, some 30, some 60. Let anyone with ears listen." And then later Jesus explains the parable to his disciples. Jesus says, "Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdoms and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart. This is what is sown on the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root, but endures only for a while. And when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. As for what's sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth chokes the word and yields nothing. But as for what is sown on good soil, this is one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Sermon titles are different. Have you seen the pictures from NASA's new telescope?
Yes.
I mean, one of them is on your bulletin board. But have you seen some of the others? The new telescope is called the James Webb Space Telescope, named for the guy who headed up NASA during the Apollo missions. While I wish they named it after a scientist instead of an administrator, there is no denying the wonders that this new instrument has revealed. Some of my favorite pictures are the so-called deep field pictures, like the one on the bulletin cover, showing enormous numbers of galaxies. Those are galaxies, not just stars, peppered all through a tiny part of the sky where no human had ever seen anything but darkness. Because the new instrument has an enormous multi-panel mirror and is kept very, very cold and is stranded out in the darkness of space and other technical aspects I won't bore you with, this telescope can see wonders that have been hidden from us forever. Those galaxies have always been there. They've been there before there was such a thing as a human being. They've been there before there was a planet for us to live on. Scientists even knew they were there. Maybe not the exact number or location of them, but it's not a surprise to anyone who learns about space that there are a bunch of galaxies we can't see. But knowing something is there and seeing it are two different things. For all of human history until a few weeks ago, all those galaxies were invisible. And now we've seen them. And I'm excited to say that this is nowhere near the end of what we haven't seen. This is a sermon about evangelism. I kind of decided not to start with that, because if you're like me, you probably just cringed a little. However, if you're someone who hates talking about evangelism, I think you might actually like this sermon. We'll get back to all those galaxies in a bit, but I really think that talking about evangelism is very important. And it's not the kind of evangelism you've probably heard all your life. Maybe you start tuning out at the very mention of the E word because you, like me, have been given this incomplete and even misleading idea of what evangelism We've been told that evangelism is about being gregarious, extroverted, smile-wearing, firm hand-shaking, argument-winning salespeople who have enough charisma to call up an entourage and get them to go to lunch, or to church, or to a mission, or pretty much anywhere, and you can talk them into paying more than their own way. For folks like us, evangelism like that is all about guilt, even shame. It's about somebody asking you why you didn't invite your neighbors or relatives or friends to church and looking at you disappointedly when you say you don't do that kind of thing. They lay upon us the idea that the reason why church membership and finances are dwindling is at least partly because we're not doing our part in being the kind of person who can get people to join and pledge. The thing is, you're fine. In fact, you're probably a pretty good evangelist. You're not perfect, but neither are the marketing gurus and super charismatic leaders who traditionally had a monopoly on the job. There's a place for the talents of advertising execs and motivational speakers, of course, but there's also a place for the rest of us. Maybe what's happening with the church these days isn't death or even dying, but transformation. And maybe you're a part of that. Gathered in by a God who loves you so much, God wants you to be part of this wonderful new thing that's being born. Just like stewardship is about gratitude and really not about the church's budget, evangelism isn't really about church's membership. Membership is kind of a side effect. I don't think the point of evangelism is to make great disciples of Christ feel guilty because they don't have the spiritual gift of gab or the charisma of a movie star. Paul says that in Christ there is neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek, slave nor free. I think he now added that in Christ there is neither loner nor life of the party, contemplative nor demonstrative, hugger nor person who needs their space. I think there is room for everyone in spreading the good news of God's love, even for nerds like me who spend too much time looking at pictures in space. I think that evangelism means letting people know that they are loved even if they feel unlovable, valued even if everyone calls them worthless, forgivable even if people call them monsters so often they start to believe it. And I think every single one of you is already doing that. I love the Bible, and I love the story of Christ, and I love theology, but I think all that is just a tiny, tiny part, a grain of sand in the universe that is the good news of God's love. It's like the difference between the number of stars you see looking at the sky on a reasonably clear, light-polluted New Orleans night, and the number of galaxies that are really there. To me, the good news of God's love and salvation is as varied and plentiful as those galaxies in the James Webb Telescope's deep field images. And they're just as hard for us to see sometimes. Though it's easier to see if someone helps you look. I want to help people who most need to see that unimaginable love, partly because they can help me see it too. Some of these folks show up in church, but a lot of them are out there, not on some distant continent, but at hand. And as far as the usual demographic studies go, they are invisible. They are the friend of yours who hates the idea of churches because their niece was abused by a minister. They are the guy who thinks the good news is some fairy tale about a big white man with a beard and a white robe. They are the woman who was afraid to leave her house and certainly afraid to go to a place like a church where lots of people are, because her old boyfriend told everyone he was going to kill her if he found her. They are the kid who really wants some word of hope, but whose parents have too many problems of their own. They're the boy who thought it was better to take a fistful of pills than admit to himself, let alone anyone else, that he's gay. They're the teenage kid on a Greyhound bus with his classmates on a trip to Washington, D.C., who thinks they'll never fit in, that God made some kind of mistake when he was born, that the only people who could love him are the people who felt like they had to, like his parents or his pastor. And nothing will ever work and you might as well figure a way out to get out of this life so that the world will be a better place. That last one was pretty specific. Because that last kid was me. And the only reason I'm here alive now is one, I couldn't figure out the best way to die. And two, a girl named Rebecca Littman saw I was alone and played a game of cards with me. She didn't get me to go to her church. She was Jewish anyway. And she didn't make me fear for my soul. And we never were really close. And I don't even think she thought twice about what she was doing. But she saved my life. And she was an evangelist to me. And yes, I said she was Jewish. She showed to me this invisible world where I was worth the time of day and much more. How do we reach these invisible people, many of whom are intentionally hiding? I have no idea, really. But my plan is to just try stuff and hope that God guides me somehow. This is why I've been working with the new Worshiping Communities Committee of this Presbyterian. Because we can't keep doing things the same way. Because the same way isn't working anymore. Also, we are and have been wasting the gifts of most Christians by drowning them in guilt. Trying to concentrate our resources on the places and demographics that seem the most straightforward ways of reaching out, even if they aren't anymore. One night I came upon a man who was crawling around on the ground under a lamppost. I asked him if he was okay. He said he dropped his car keys and didn't know where they went. I wasn't in a hurry, so I helped him look for a while, but the keys were nowhere to be found. I asked the man to go over how he lost his keys in the first place. He said he was walking along and dropped his keys in the grass, about 10 yards away from where we were looking. You dropped your keys all the way over there? Then why are we looking here? The man pointed at the lamppost. The light's back, he said. Okay, so I lied. That didn't happen to me. That's a very old dad joke, but I think I heard from my dad. But I think we Christians do this kind of thing all the time. We rely on demographic surveys of people who already go to one church or another because it's easier, more efficient, or at least familiar. But we need to start looking in the dark, away from the lamppost, scattering seed like a sower in the story. Did you ever notice how ridiculous a sower is? They throw seeds all over the place. A good farmer would tell them that they are wasting their seed, letting it go here and there, even places where it's pretty much guaranteed not to grow. I think we need to be equally ridiculous, divinely ridiculous. I think we need to be casting the good news of God's love all over the place, because even if the people we reach aren't going to be elders or ministers or outstanding members of a congregation, even if they never know it was Jesus who saved them, they will still be won for Christ. Because it's not us who does the saving, it's Christ who does the saving. We're just invited to be a part of it. And this is important work. Much more important, in my opinion, than adding some names to the church rolls. People need help, and we are called to help them. As the passage from Isaiah says, I have given you as a covenant to the people, a light to the nations, to open the eyes that are blind, to bring out the prisoners from the dungeons, from the prison those who sit in darkness. There's a lot of darkness these days, and a lot of people sit there. A coworker of mine committed suicide a few weeks ago. He wasn't a close colleague, but I saw him at least once a week. A while back, a very good friend of mine got very sick. Her husband, also a very good friend, couldn't keep a job that would let him care for her. He shot her dead and then killed himself. My best friend in college tried to kill himself twice since I knew him, and I think at least once more before. I wish with all my heart I could say that this was a complete list of people who I've known who took their life or tried to. So many people. So many beautiful people I love deeply. The stakes are astronomical. Black holes of despair and violence that circle around. But God's love is light. The light of millions, billions of galaxies. Galaxies that are there now, have been there forever, even if we don't see them. This is why I started my YouTube worship ministry, presently on hiatus while I help care for Christy. I hope God will send people to that channel, even countries away, even years from now, even if I never know who they are, even if it's only a few people, so that maybe, just maybe, I can help them feel loved and valued and worthwhile. And you people sitting here, and you people who are watching this online, are certainly doing marvelous acts of evangelism every day, even if you don't think of it as an e-word, even if you don't even realize what you're doing. I think we can do so much more working together, pulling the light we are given, if you will. Please share with me and with others around and with other people here what's going on, where you see need, where you think some seed needs to be sown, even if there's no hope for return. Let's be of service to each other in Christ, even if it doesn't involve marketing or feeling guilty. Let's look where the light is not so bright. Let's see the invisible, and make them visible. Let's be evangelists. Amen.